onto the computer. Yes. All right. So today we have some, what I hope is going to be fun. I'm planning to talk a little bit about Yiddish today. And I suspect that possibly most, if not everybody here, knows some Yiddish words. Do you have any Yiddish words that you know at all? So I just muted you, so you may have to unmute for a second and say a Yiddish word. Oh, I promise you do, but it could be bad words. But if you're of a certain age and you have watched some movies, nothing. Huh? What? Say it again, Mom.
Nudge.
Nudge. Nudge is a good Yiddish word.
But I have two.
Which one? Amy, what you got?
Sorry.
Oh, I said klutz.
Klutz. Yeah, klutz is a good Yiddish word.
That's good word for the Finkelsteins.
There you go. That's true.
I mean, I can't think of bupkis.
Bupkis. He's got. I got bupkis. Yeah, I got bupkis. That's what I say.
Okay, I have a few. Bissell.
Good.
Breckle.
Uh-huh.
Let me see, Zerissen and Zakrochen.
Does everybody know all those words? Did anybody not know the meaning of the words that we've heard so far? Everybody. So Carol, you may have to explain some. I'm looking at some. See, right. Go.
Okay. Well, Zerissen means torn. Zakrochen was one of my father's words. He said it meant sort of shabby.
Okay.
My mother said it's not a word. Bissell is a little bit, and Breckle is a little bit. So Breckle bit of Bissell is a really tiny bit. A Breckle baby is a brand new baby.
And where was your family from?
Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
Let me see. I would see Odessa and Mogila, sort of near Minsk. And
Carol knows enough Yiddish that she was able to speak to somebody from Argentina this week in Yiddish, which kind of really impressive.
Cool.
I know, very impressive.
So cool.
That's so cool. So Mom had an experience like that one time where she was on an airplane and there was this Jewish family. Where were they from? Russia or something, Mom? And they were coming into wherever she was, and I think that they were coming into Shreveport, and they had almost no English to use. So at some point, the pilot makes an announcement, and they look at her and like, what? So they were trying to talk to each other, but it was really hard because they really didn't speak a lot of English, and so they were trying to figure out what did he just say, and Mom said. The pilot said that they were going to be circling a little bit because of something, weather or something, and that they couldn't land yet. And so Mom said, she like thought, and she said, I know, hakafut, because when on Simchat Torah, when you're circling the sanctuary, when you're carrying the Torahs, it's called doing hakafut. So she said, hakafut, we're doing circles around. And I thought that was brilliant. And they knew exactly what she was talking about. And so
love that.
And that's the beauty of having another language that people know. So I am muting everybody again. I'm going to share the screen. I'm going to show you a couple of links. So this is what's left from last week. Like I said, look at this. This is so cool. My Ladino plaque here. It says Ladino. And the Ladino was sometimes written in language that looked a lot like Rashi script. And that says Ladino in the Rashi script type. And then there's Ladino in Hebrew. And so there's some of those links, but I put some links here for Yiddish, and you got to go away. So the one that's the most serious, and I'm debating about how serious I want to be today, because I mean, we've been doing this for enough weeks now that some of you are really good. Some of you know more technically about some of these languages. If I hadn't dabbled in them, I mean, Judaico-Romanesco I know a lot about, but other languages, not as much. And I didn't even do the things that I knew last week about Ladino. We could have done a whole thing of Ladino songs. That might have been fun. But YIVO Institute, YIVO is kind of like one of the definitive, actually, there's more I'm going to add to this, but YIVO is kind of the definitive place. It's, we could show you who it is. fostering knowledge of the history and culture of Eastern European Jewry. And you can read more about it. I've got you the links. There's some very cool stuff in here. Books and all kinds of stuff. I like this download the basic facts about Yiddish. I was going to, we can share it, but it's here already. It was from 1946 and they recently updated it in, I want to say 2014, am I right? 2014. And it tells you about what Yiddish is, and it's got some examples of it. It's the spoken language of a lot of people, the Ashkenazic people, which means Eastern European. Yiddish, the word literally means Jewish. That's what the language, the name of the language means. It's the Jewish language. It's been called other things. One of my favorite stories about what it's called, a lot of people who speak it say, oh, do you speak the Mama Lushan, which is the mother tongue? And it's not the only language that refers to its own language as the mother tongue. If you're speaking to other people who come from the same place where you come from, you say, do you speak the mother tongue? But when I was in Lexington, Kentucky, there was a couple there who they were professors at the University of Kentucky, and he had trained also at the University of Chicago, which is where Ricky had been at the University of Chicago for 2 years, and then he came here. This guy was at the University of Chicago undergrad, and now he was teaching computer science or something. And as an undergrad, and he was a very secular, very reformed Jew. And as an undergrad, he decided this would be fun. Look, they're offering Yiddish. Let me take Yiddish. And he took Yiddish at the University of Chicago, and he fell in love with the language. And he started learning more and more. And he decided when he started having children that he was going to speak to the children only in Yiddish, that he was going to try to do what he could to preserve the language. So the wife did not speak to them in Yiddish. He spoke to them in Yiddish. And the kids, 2 PhDs for parents, the kids were off the charts brilliant. At 3 years old, as is the case of other places, there was only a reform and a conservative shul there. He was the guy who taught a lot of the kids how to do the chanting for trope. He did this very cool finger motion trope thing that I'll talk to you about at some point. But he was teaching Yiddish to this girl. That was the only language he spoke to her. And at 3 years old, he started teaching her Hebrew and biblical Hebrew, so that they would start studying Torah at 3, which is the way some do in Cheder. And she knew how to say, the only kid I ever knew who was 3 years old who knew how to say dodecahedron, but she also knew how to say it in Yiddish, which kind of freaked me out. And then fast forward a little bit, she's still only about 4 years old. And a man comes to Lexington, Kentucky, comes into the shul, sitting not far from them at services, and speaks Yiddish. And they knew he was coming, and he speaks Yiddish. So the professor friend of mine was the one who was designated to show him around on Shabbos so that he could find his way and know what to do, blah, blah, blah. And he is speaking only Yiddish with this man. And the little girl was kind of surprised because she wasn't used to seeing her father speaking Yiddish to people. And she was interrupting and asking questions and things all in Yiddish. And at some point, this guy, the visitor, says, I'm not used to seeing he says in Yiddish, I'm not used to seeing little kids speaking Mama Lushan. And she looks at him and says, no, it's the Tata Lushan. Because only Tata would speak to her in Yiddish. So Tata is dad and Mama is mom. So, and I just love that. I can't think of Yiddish without thinking of Tata Lushan instead of Mama Lushan. And so anyway, we're there. So Yiddish, the number of speakers before World War II, and then obviously after Shoah, the number of speakers went down considerably. As you probably know, the Hasidim, the ultra-Orthodox Jews in Israel, in America, any country where they live, the ultra-Orthodox, many of them, the ones who originated from Eastern Europe, still speak Yiddish as their first language. They speak Yiddish at home. They might reserve Hebrew just for prayers, just for holy things, and not use it for anything else and not spoken. Many of the ultra-Orthodox, even the ones who live in Israel, do not believe in the modern state of Israel. They think that the Messiah has to come before the modern state of Israel deserves to be a state. And so they don't believe that Israel should exist, even when they live in Jerusalem. So I'll go figure that one out. But they will speak Yiddish as their mama lashon, as their mother tongue, or lashon hakodesh, which is the holy language. But a cool thing that happens is that because the Jews that came from Eastern Europe spread out in a variety of places, there's core parts of Yiddish that exist as Yiddish in many, many countries. And so it became a kind of, we'll call it like the English, it became the primary language for many Jews to be able to speak to each other all over the place. That's what this is talking about. This was helpful. It's part of why I'm still showing you this article, because I really don't want to do the whole article, but I wanted to not make up a number for you. Yiddish originated around the year 1000 of the Common Era. So it's about as old as many other European languages. Max Weinreich is kind of one of the authorities, and he was the founder of the EVO, which I'm going to show you more things of. But anyway, this is how he describes the origin of it. Jews of the Romance-speaking territories in what is now southern France and northern Italy migrated to the Middle Rhine Basin. They shifted from a Jewish form of Romance to the local German of the period, and as they adapted it to their needs, it was permeated with rabbinical Hebrew that had formed a component of their previous language, as well as Romance elements. Because Jews tended to live in separate communities, any language they took on would be their own unique variant thereof. We've talked about that a lot. The Crusades forced many of these Jews to emigrate from the Rhine Basin. Together with them, Yiddish moved eastward to southern and central Germany, and from there to what is now Bavaria, Austria, Czechoslovakia, and Hungary. As a result, the German component of Yiddish shares numerous features with the Bavarian, the upper as in southern, and the Franconian, the central dialects of German. From the 13th century on, Yiddish-speaking Jews settled in growing numbers in what is now Poland, Lithuania, Belarus, Ukraine, and Romania. Sorry, I'm trying to make it smaller so you can see all this at the same time. And in the course of time, Eastern Europe became the center of Yiddish, as well as the most populous Jewish settlement in the world. By the 18th century, Yiddish was the language of nearly all the Jews of Europe, except for the Sephardim, who lived mainly in the Mediterranean lands. That looks like a very confusing map, but it's not as confusing as it looks. Lots of arrows going everywhere. But anyway, it keeps going. And talks about assimilation and how the language changed. And you are very welcome to continue to read some of these things. I wanted to get to some actual Yiddish, and then we can come back to this if we want. But the article is there for anybody to see. It's made up of a bunch of different languages. The core of it is German, just like English, by the way. The core of English is German, and some Romance language, but it's a fusion of those things and rabbinic dialect. So we've got a bunch of dialects. There's a map here of all of that, and there's American Yiddish and Standard Yiddish and and you can look at that. I don't want to do that. There's a bunch of things that I want to try to do. I want to start with the easy. I wanted to start with, there are lots of pages that show core words that you might want to learn in the language. But did you see that Duolingo is offering Yiddish now? I should put a link to that one too. It's free. You can learn Yiddish through Duolingo. But I wanted to show you a few other ways of learning Yiddish, because I thought that this would be a fun way for you to be exposed to Yiddish. You may know some words like oy vey. You've probably heard that. Nosh, you know what nosh is? To like snack. Klutz, we did that one already. But you could learn the Duolingo. But this is the free course started April 6th last year. If love is in the air, check out 10 ridiculous Yiddish pickup lines. Maybe we should look at that now that we had, I didn't even see that, Valentine's Day. I was just looking at these words. So hopefully you know some of these. This is 18. 18, by the way, if you don't know, is marked by chai. The word chai in Hebrew is made up of two letters, a chet and a yud. The chet represents the number 8, and the yud represents the number 10. And so the number 18 represents the word for life, chai. Although the truth is that if you were writing it in Hebrew, you would have 1 through 10 is Aleph, Bet, Gimel, Dalet, Hey, Vav, Zayin, Chet, Tet. Yud is 10, and 11 is Yud Aleph, and Bet, and Yud Aleph, Yud Bet, Yud Gimel. So by the time you got to 18, it would be Yud Chet, but that's Yach, and that's not fun. Chai is so much more fun to be talking about. So anyway, so this one had to do with 18 words. Some of them were many more, and I didn't want to have to do more than that. And most of you may know these already, which is part of what makes it fun. Oi means something like woe is to me, oy vey. It was made longer when you say oy vey's mir, which means woe is to me, or oy gewalt. I don't know why. It's more of a cry for help. Oy gewalt. A Yiddish cup. Now, I don't think that in this mixed company, I can tell you all of the ways that Yiddish cup means, but it means a Jewish head. It could refer to someone as a smart person. You say, oh, that guy's got a Yiddish cup. Sometimes it's used ironically. There's also something called a Goyish cup. That's the part I shouldn't talk about in mixed company. Goyish usually means non-Jewish. The word goy means nation or people in Hebrew. Israel is often referred to as a goy gadol or a goy kadosh, a holy nation in the Torah. But in Yiddish, often goy or goyish means not Jewish, and it's not always complimentary. I will tell you my favorite joke about that. I will stop the share. Well, no, I'll keep the share going so that we're still doing this. One of my favorite jokes about that is this old guy, Irving, decides really late in life, he's been married forever, and he decided really late in life that he's going to become not Jewish. He's converting to Christianity. And his wife says, Irving, are you sure? She says, Shirley, I'm sure I want to be Christian. It makes some sense to me now, and I want to be Christian. She says, okay, whatever. So he starts practicing Christianity and going to church instead. But this guy was always a practicing Jew. And so every morning he would have said his morning prayers as a Jew, and he'd even put on his talis and put on his phylacteries, his tefillin. And sure enough, like a few weeks after he decides he's Christian and he's being a good Christian, one day she wakes up and there he is sitting at the foot of the bed and he's putting on his talis and his tefillin. And she said, Irving, what? I'm praying. No, Irving, what? Didn't you remember? You converted to Christianity. He said, Goyish cup. That means like he's thinking like a non-Jew. Why is he putting on his tefillin? Which is so opposite of everything. I just thought it was adorable. There's also, cup, by the way, is a head. So there's also one of my favorite things that I think my family liked to use a lot was Lakshan cup. Lakshan cup means you're a noodle head. And you can imagine it wasn't very complimentary to be an election cup, a noodle head. It sounds fancy, Lakshan, but it's not so luxurious. Balabusta is usually a term of endearment, and it means something like, they're calling it perfect homemaker. That kind of sounds like perfect homemaker, but the way they're, so we've got someone who named her cookbook, Balabusta, says someone who loves to bring family together by cooking and caring for them. It has to do with, it comes from the Hebrew words, Ba'alat Habayit, which means the Baal is the master, the ruler, and you may remember even in Torah, Baal was the name of a god, but in modern Hebrew, Baal usually means husband too, not because he's the master, it's just the word. And Ba'alat means, I hate to say mistress of, but it's the head of the house. Ba'alat Habayit means the head of the house. And so Balabusta means that she's the head of the house. And that's a compliment. It's not a bad thing. It means she does a good job taking care of the house. Nash is to snack or to nibble. It comes from the Yiddish word, which is nashen. It's also used to describe a light meal or any kind of food. So you could say, let's have a nash before we leave the house. Or you may know we've got a holiday coming up. It's about Purim, and the food that we eat on Purim is hamantashen. And there's a song where the chorus ends with, and nash some hamantashen. Hamantashen are these triangular cookies that are usually filled with fruity jelly type stuff, preserves, or chocolate. I like the chocolate ones. I think that's a new thing. Kvetch is a very important thing. And by the way, Yiddish is one of the few languages that uses three consonants together a lot. So kvetch, where the ch isn't much of a, that's really just two sounds together. Schlep is when we're using three sounds together, but kvetch means to complain or to whine. And you might often hear a mother say, stop kvetching. Schlep is to carry something around, but it could be something like in the example here where they say, we moved to the wrong part of town. It's such a schlep to get to the synagogue. So you're not schlepping your stuff, your troubles in a bag. You're saying it's a schlep. Mensch, that's three consonants together, an N and a T and a Ch, which is actually a sh. But mensch, and often it's spelled like this. So, or with NT, so the ch is often a sh. And you'll often find the SCH as being a way to spell this. So the shul, synagogue is SCHUL, and schlep. So schlep, Carol, you wanted to add something? I will unmute you. Go.
Okay, I wanted to say that the Russian language frequently has three consonants together.
Mm-hmm.
Like the word for hello is здравствуйте. It's D, wait a minute, Z, D, R.
Gotcha.
Took me a week to figure out how to say that.
It takes some practice. And that's good. That's another Eastern European thing, but it's one of the few. You don't see it in English very often unless you're using languages that are borrowed from other languages. So thank you for that. All right, we got you. You moved, I'm muting you again, but we got you. Mensch is a decent human being. The word mensch just means man, like capital M man. It could be lowercase m man, but it also means capital M man, being a decent mensch. We had a story one time in Italy where my in-laws they lived in this, on weekends, they would go to this little teeny community called Sant'Elpidio up in the mountains. And one day they were unpacking when they got to Sant'Elpidio, and a man knocks on their door and says that they're collecting money, that there was a problem, some kind of a flood or something with the local church. And he's trying to collect some money. If everybody could give a little bit, then they'd be able to afford what they need to fix the church. And my father-in-law reaches into his pocket to pull out some money. He says, but you know that I'm Jewish, right? And the guy looks at me and says, but yeah, but we're all good Christians anyway. And so mensch was that word. So mensch means a decent guy. So someone said, is it like being a gentleman? But it's not a gentleman in that it's not someone who does it's not, gentleman sometimes has a connotation of like prim and proper kind of things. This is just a very decent human being. Tachlis is a great word. Tachlis they use also in Yiddish. That it means, what's the nitty gritty of the thing. Get to the point. Don't sugarcoat it. Tachlis. Tell me what's going on. The tachlis. Klutz we already talked about is a very clumsy person, also known as a Finkelstein or a Finkelstein. That's our definition now. Klutz is someone who's consistently falling or dropping things or tripping on the curb. We have a tendency to trip on the curb in our family, I guess. That's a klutz. Platz means to fall down, to burst, to shatter, to crack, to explode. Sometimes someone who is bursting with emotion, I finished a marathon, I could just plotz, or I ate so much food, I could plotz. Or you could be plotzing from news or laughter. Schmooze, now that's one that I hear on mainstream stories and television too. It has to do with talking or small talk or chatting or whatever, shoot the breeze. There's another word that's used a lot in mainstream television and movies and whatever the media, but it drives me crazy sometimes. And the word is spiel. And they'll talk about, and I had to hear the whole spiel, this whole story, the whole thing, but they'll often pronounce it spiel. And that drives me crazy. It's a spiel, like a schmooze. It's not a smooze, it's a schmooze. Which reminds me of some of the other words that we used with a shma. We would say, no, I'm not going to use that one. I'm only going to use nice words. Shmata. A shmata is a rag. Shmata is a rag. And often the Jews were prohibited from working in other businesses. So sometimes they would go into the shmata business, which means clothing. They would call it shmata as in rags. There were times when it was just rags, but it could have been any kind of clothing and they'd still call it shmata rags. And in Shreveport, for example, many of the clothing stores were run by Jews. Rubenstein's and Selber Brothers and Steinmart and things like that were shmata businesses, which didn't mean that they were rags as in terrible quality. That could have been very good quality, but they still called it a shmata or shmatas. And sometimes ironically, when my kids were little, when they, you're burping them and they'd have to you put a rag on your shoulder, we would call it a schmutzi shmata. It's just fun to say because schmutz is garbage, is, dirt. It's schmutz is dirt. Usually somebody, a bubby, a grandma would come up to you and, take some spit and take the schmutz off of your face. And so schmutzi shmata was a dirty rag. And my mother-in-law came at some point, Max was about 4 months old, and she spoke German fluently. She'd still like not get the schmutzi shmata thing. And she'd like, smutzi smata. Anyway, but she also made fun of me for saying garbaggio. So yeah, Shlemiel Shlemazel, Mike, that was great. Shlemiel Shlemazel Hottentot Incorporated. That's exactly right. Shlemiel and Shlemazel. So Shlemiel and Shlemazel are tricky. That's a really fun one because they sometimes go hand in hand. That Shlemiel is the one who's often, it's not just klutzy, it's somebody who just somehow can't get stuff right. And the Shlemazel is often the one, you hear the word mazel in there, which is, you've heard of mazel tov. Mazel has to do with luck, and the Shlemazel means that someone, go Lisa, Shlemazel is the one who like winds up being the one who gets the dumped soup on them when they go reaching for the thing. That the Shlemazel somehow has the bad fortune to exactly. The Shlemazel has Alexi, you're just writing to me, but that's okay. Yes, it's Laverne and Shirley. Lexi was trying to show that she knew. So yes, we've got more words that we know. Yenta. So anybody who's seen Fiddler on the Roof in English knows some words in Yiddish, but now on Broadway, there is still a Yiddish version of Fiddler on the Roof. And anyone who sees it, even people who don't know Yiddish, just say you really need to watch it in Yiddish and see the whole thing in Yiddish. I haven't seen it, obviously. I don't know when we're going to get to see it all the way in Shreveport. Although I did see Fiddler on the Roof in Shreveport. It was bizarre. Yeah, you saw it, Amy? Ugh, Michael saw it. So I saw Fiddler on the Roof in Shreveport at the Strand, and it was bizarre because I was in an audience of people, including my very own sons, who had never seen it before. I had never in New York been in an audience of people who had never seen Fiddler before. I had never been in an audience of where people didn't know every single word to not just the songs, but to everything. I mean, how could you not know the words to tradition? It was the baker, it was the butcher, grandma. No. Anyway, anyone who doesn't know every word. And I was in, the whole place was like laughing at stuff. Like, what do you mean laughing? You're supposed to say the words, not anyway. It was hysterical to watch it with them. So the Yenta is the matchmaker, but it's also often refers to as the gossip or a busybody. You see, she was definitely known for her meddling in here. Shanda, it's a scandal. It's a, did you hear what he did? But a Shanda. I had a Yiddish speaking couple who up in Albany, New York, that I met by accident. I was standing and waiting for a bus, and they were standing there and their packages looked really heavy, and I offered to help them. And And it turns out we were all excited that we were all Jewish, and they invited me up, and I had a bissel and nash, I had a little nash. And they read, in those days, there was a newspaper in Yiddish that came out every single day, the daily forwards, the daily forwards, which then went on to become a weekly instead of a daily. And now it's in English more than Yiddish. You can find, there's a little bit of Yiddish, but I had taken a class with Isaac Bashevis Singer, who wrote, he won a Nobel Prize in literature for writing in Yiddish. And I took class with him. He came to Albany to teach, and he was also the keynote speaker at my graduation that year. And so they would talk about him. He wrote for the Yiddish daily papers, and he had an article that would like these a series, so that he'd tell a story and it would come out a little bit at a time every day in these newspapers. And they would always say to me, "What that friend of yours did, what he wrote, it would make a Cossack blush. What a shanda. It would make a Cossack blush." Yeah, he had that tendency. I'll tell you stories about that one day. Shtick. That's another one that you hear them say. Late night TV, we'll talk about a shtick. Did you see a shtick? It's their bit, their routine, their gimmick, but they often call it a stick. Why can't they shut? I mean, that's just not right. So I know I talk too loud, but that's my shtick. Or Don Rickles' shtick is to just make fun of everybody. And people thought that's funny. And from Don Rickles, it's funny. Chutzpah. Chutzpah means gall, boldness, audacity. It took real chutzpah for her to go straight to the CEO to ask for a job. Sometimes it's, what chutzpah? You shouldn't have done that. It goes both ways. Meshugana means crazy. It's crazy. It's related to the word mishigas, which means craziness. I said shmata. I forgot that it was going to be in here. You're going out of the house wearing that shmata? That happens a lot. Mothers will, every language you speak, mothers will always say, "You're wearing that?" Amy, go. Your hand is raised.
We had a debate at work about whether the correct term for a person from Michigan should be Michiganian or Michigander.
Michigan, yeah.
And they were like, all of these people were having this conversation around me, and they weren't talking to me, who was the only person in the room who was actually from Michigan. When someone finally asked my opinion, I said, we always say, in my family, you can say Michiganian, you can say Michigander, but in my family, we all say it's Michigas. And there was like dead silence.
There's Michiganers, right?
And I realized this was the wrong crowd.
That's right. They wouldn't get the Michigan joke. Right. I love it. All right. So
Donna, I thought you would appreciate it. So
I really appreciate that. I very much appreciate that. Thank you. Because that's a word I would have pronounced too. I would have hit that one right away. Because that's my shtick. All right. So Bubby and Zadie are grandma and grandpa. And my mom. So when I grew up, and I don't know, I've got other people here. Jasmine has a bubby, but I didn't have a bubby. I had grandmas. And not only did I have grandmothers, but we went by grandma last name. I had a grandma Finkelstein and a grandma Weiner and great grandma Finkelstein and great, we went by last names for a long time. So when Max was born, who was the first grandchild on my side and my ex's side, we realized that he has an Italian grandmother who obviously wanted to be called Nonna. He has, my dad was married to a woman who was from an Israeli. So we thought, well, that's easy. We could have him call her Savta. But when we asked, she said, no, she doesn't feel like a grandmother. So don't call her Savta. I don't even remember I think he's supposed to call her by her first name. I don't remember. And then mom, I said, Bubby is such a fun word. Could you be Bubby? And she said, yeah, that sounds fun. So she was okay with Bubby. And now all her grandchildren call her Bubby. So now there's a Bubby in the family. So you had a Bubby and a grandma. So I guess Bubby was, well, you talked about that, about the fact that your dad's family was more Yiddish speaking, right? Wasn't that the Shanda in your family?
Correct. Yeah.
So your dad's family was the Bubby family, yeah, I guess the Weiners tried very much to fit into American society in ways where didn't want to have accents and all of that, and didn't. I mean, they did pretty well like that. So you know that there are Yiddish curses, and in this case, curse doesn't mean bad words, but there are bad words. Most of the bad words you hear no, that's not true. I can't say that anymore. Many bad words in Yiddish that you hear on many of the, whatever, you hear bad words in Yiddish all the time on TV. I don't know if they can get away with it because it's Yiddish and they, whatever, but they talk a lot about family jewels. Let's just say that. I don't want to go into any of those. And I thought that there were a few more that I was going to do, but this is good. And maybe it'll remind us of others, because I really want to get to, we're running out of time, and I wanted to get to a few other things. All of these are linked on the website. This is a bunch of Yiddish links that you can find. Some of them may go back to things that I already showed you. Some of this was geared toward children getting to learn, and that's where I want to take you next. I had two really fun things that I want to show you. This is a very cool website that I discovered one day, and I am loving it. I wish I could have done this. I may want to do something like this one day too. Anybody who knows anything about computers knows that I think it was the beginning of this year or last year that they stopped supporting Adobe Flash. Adobe Flash was this very simple animation program that you could use to animate things. And anybody who wrote their stuff in Adobe Flash had to scramble and try to change it, or you lose it. There were a lot of cute Jewish things for kids that were written in Adobe Flash that I can't use anymore. But this is a Yiddish language class, and I'll show it to you. So we go this way. I'm going to let you see it. I hope you can see it like this, pushing it up. This is, no, not that, this. Ready?
Good morning. Ich heiss Nomi. Ich bin a Mädel. Good morning, Moby.
Peeps.
Moby is a robot. Is a chaver. Hey, Meierke. Good morning.
Peeps.
Meierke is a jingle. Du, Moby, a jingle? Nein, du bist a Robot. Jo, ihr seid Chaverim. Jo, Moby, wir seien euch Chaverim. Hey, Pero, good morning. Pero is a Mädel. Sie is euch a Chaverte. Wir seinen Chavertes. Moby, Meierke, Pero is da. Sie seinen Chaverim. Wir seinen alle da. Wir seinen alle Chaverim.
Yay.
Good. Oh, Moby.
So here's the vocabulary. You can learn the vocabulary with it. There's grammar with it. There's the movie. I don't know how much of that you understood. I am amazed at how much I understand, partially because some of it is words that are similar to words we already have heard, partially because some of it is very Hebrew. Chaverim is friends. I mean, I don't know how you would know that if you didn't know that the word chaverim was friends, things like that. But I think that this is fun, and I think it's easy to learn, and there's chapters, and it's It's got the vocabulary and the culture and the blah, blah, blah. And I thought that that would be fun. So I'm going to remind you, let's see. I guess I eliminated my, the B'nai Zion page from there, but it's on there. I can find it for you again. What I wanted to show you is something else that I think may amaze you. One more video, because we only have a few more minutes. I will try to find the other things, but I'll show you how to find it.
Tan blazer, blue glasses, Chaya, blazer. Sorry, I'm late.
I don't have a lot of time. I have.
You recognize who that is? So Maya Bialik has a PhD in neuroscience, and she speaks Yiddish. I don't know if you knew that about her.
To be back at the hospital in an hour.
Yes, my mother told me that your mother told her that you're a neurosurgeon. Very impressive.
Your mother didn't mention what you do.
Freelance?
Okay, so as our mothers may have discussed, I'm interested in leading a traditional Jewish life. I'm seeking candidates. I know exactly what I want. I have all the questions to ask right off the bat. So blind dates is just a more efficient way of, seeing if this is even possible. You understand.
Totally get it. Fire away.
Well, the first question is a new one. What's he doing here?
Oh, hey, yeah,
Wieso, was benutzt du in dein Kind?
Machen uns stau, als du bist der Kleine. Weil es geht schlecht, schlepp mich raus. Weil es geht gut, schlepp sich raus.
Was krieg ich von dem?
Sie will machen von dir die Scheidung von der letzten 3 Jahren zurück.
Ask him. I just ran into my buddy Laser here out front, and I've never seen a kosher California roll. So
Are you Jewish?
depends on your definition.
Of course he's Jewish. We went to Hebrew school together for 17
It's not a
years.
black and white question.
What's your name?
Jaime,
Single?
depends on your definition.
Okay, let's get started. How do you feel about children? Yes, no, how many?
Excellent question. I'd like at least 2 children, possibly 3, God willing, at least a boy and a girl. So as the Talmud says, to replace ourselves on earth and continue the traditions of our fathers and matrilineal descent.
Good. And you?
I just came for the sushi.
You don't want children?
No, I might want. I don't know. I think the question in and of itself is ridiculous.
Excuse me?
Well, I mean, you're looking for a potential spouse here. Is the relationship between the two of you not going to play into any of this?
I'm going to get there.
Well, you're the one that said you had no time.
He has mild hypoglycemia, actually. You want some sushi?
No, I appreciate the honesty. How do you feel about eating kosher? In, out of the house?
Well, you see, the Bible was written by a cabal of sages, let's call them, who used a story and narrative based in Bronze Age polytheism.
I'm so
mythology of
sorry.
the-
My mother is calling. I better get this. Hello, Ma. Ja, du hörst mir nicht. Ja, ja. Sie sagst, was du kannst nicht leiden. Und sie sagst, was ich will. Also bitte, geh weg, Mami.
So sorry. My mother too, I got it.
Ja.
Ja, Mami, entschuldige mir, aber ich will bleiben. Steitsigkeit ist erotisch.
Sie ist nicht für dich, sie ist für mich.
Ja,
Verstimmt, Mami.
Verstehe.
Ich habe von mir 2 Schmenderikes, was meinen, als ich red nicht kein Jiddisch und Pater in unserer Zeit.
I'll call you back.
Romantische Nacht.
A lange Shabbos-Mahlzeit und danach a doppelte Mitzvah.
Netflix und chillend.
Chilling.
3 Wörter, was beschreiben euch am besten.
Hedonist, Atheist, Feminist.
Yid, Boche, Itzt.
Was liebst der Film?
Sterne Mechomet.
Spaceballs.
Bas Mitzvah oder süße Sechsten?
Verwusst ich absuchen ihre jiddische Jerusche oder von einem Amerikaner Minik. Ich wurde investiert das zerpatterte Geld für ihre Erziehung.
Mishpoche Geschichte von Tay-Sachs.
Nein.
Schlechte Morgen-Syndrom?
Ja.
Nobelpremies?
Ja.
Meningen wegen Heimdelzion. Vaccinierung? Gebende Brust? Kriminelle Vergangenheit. Rezept Narkotik bei Delfinisch. Infektie krank. Eine Reise kein Mizrach-Afrika in den letzten 6 Monaten. Frische Fruchten.
Nein.
Das Zeugen etwas nicht, frische Fruchten. Es ein schöner Mal gewesen in Eretz Yisrael.
Ja.
Sie Emetzer hat verpackte Valises für euch.
Nein.
Ist der Mensch gewesen dein Mami? Okay, gentlemen, I think I've got everything I need. I'll be in touch, and I've already taken care of the check.
Wait, that's it? We didn't get to ask you any questions.
Oh, you'll get the opportunity to do that at our first real date where you'll be on time and you'll choose the restaurant. And I may choose to show you that I'm warm, affectionate, sensitive, charitable, pretty witty, and very, very sexy, but really just depends on how it goes.
Which one of us gets a date?
Oh, I'll decide at our next pre-screening, which will be here tomorrow. I presume you're freelance as well? See you both at 1. Psych isn't.
Kosher sushi. Doch hat der Wurst.
Kein Steigen für dich.
So that's they have a whole website called or a whole series of these videos called Yid Life Crisis, and they're often that kind of adorable. I don't know that I don't think that Maya Bialik does another one with them. But she does do a couple of other things in Yiddish. And the other thing that you should look for in Yiddish is Mandy Patinkin singing Somewhere Over the Rainbow in Yiddish. That's kind of precious. You could look up Mandy Patinkin doing anything you want in Yiddish, and it's kind of precious. And remember, because in case you don't know who Mandy Patinkin is, my kids remembered who he was when I said, "Hello, my name is Inigo Montoya. I killed my father. Prepare to die." And he said that that's turned into, he did that as a Jewish guy, believe it. Anyway, that gives you a kind of, I'm hoping, a fun taste of Yiddish, because I thought that that's a language that many people are familiar with, and I thought it would be fun to do accessible things and share some Yiddish in ways that you can do. But next week I have some interesting overview things. A couple of very interesting debates have come out just in the past 2 weeks that I wanted to share with you about Jewish languages and Ladino, and just coincidentally, there was this debate about Ladino that came out in this Jewish language forum that I'm part of that I thought I would share with you, and make sure that you're aware of some of the other Jewish overview things. We also have to choose at some point what we're doing, because next week is officially our last week of the Jewish language class. So I'm going to stop the recording